This step again is very process driven. You have to picture yourself, you're still in a workshop setting, and basically you clarified the reasons why we have the market failures that we already have prioritized after we categorize the market. So the 5 whys will give you the root causes, and from the root causes we need to basically develop our interventions because the root causes are what needs to be addressed. So, from the root causes, we need to develop, obviously, the strategic priorities, marketing objectives, and the key intervention area, which will definitely be the focus of the interventions. A key element in doing that is to really frame this within a context of sustainability. At the end of the day, the purpose of looking at the entire market is to improve use over need at scale in a sustainable way. And that's why we look at the market across the production to use spectrum and look at what is not working well in the market, and that's why we have intervention addressing what is not working well in the market. So remember that everything you do is entrenched in this concept of sustainability, right? So, developing strategic priorities. Could someone in this room explain to me what is a strategic priority?
Well, I think I would say it is something which has to happen to unblock elements of the market without which that market will not grow, which is the priority part. And they're strategic because we internally have gone through a process of assessing whether they're things that are within our capability to control or influence and will help us achieve scale and sustainability.
Wonderful. So, thank you, Steve. Strategy priorities, I mean, if you want to put that very simply, is basically to give the flavor of what needs to be done. And that flavor is actually this stepping stone, or the door that you need to open to unlock what needs to be done in the market. The strategic priorities are, in my view, a wonderful way of aligning internally the team, because you don't have many strategic priorities usually. You have 2, 3 strategic priorities. And it can serve also from your external audience. It's kind of the elevator speech that you can have with your donors. Like, what are you going to do to unlock the market failures? Well, guess what? You can go from the market failures and define these strategic priorities as this is what we will do to really unlock the market, or at least the priority failures that we have identified in the market. So, strategic priorities is a little bit of a rhetoric exercise, but it's so important so that you can articulate with your stakeholders what PSI will do. And I will explain to you how I went through the process of coming up with these strategic priorities. I mean, if we have a couple of marketers here in the room that have gone through deltas, we know that in the situation analysis, we do come up with strategic priorities. The problem we had is that these strategic priorities were a little bit detached from the reality. They were not linked directly to the marketing objectives. So the beauty with this framework is that it actually allows you to really sync the strategic priorities with the marketing objectives. So let me walk you through the process I used. So first we start by, obviously, as I said yesterday, converting the root causes into desired outcome, right? So we have the bottom problem from each market failure, and we need to transform that into a desired outcome, which then becomes some sort of an objective. So what we did in Madagascar, and for me it was kind of a big aha moment, it was that on one hand, we had these market failures, we understood the market failures, we came up with root cause analysis, like root causes, and then we flipped these root causes into positive outcomes, which then became our objective. So we had failures and objectives. But basically, we had a lot of objectives for each of the failures. So it wasn't very clear to me as to how can we articulate that. And basically, the strategic objective were the link between the failures and the objective. And that's where we came up with like 3 broad categories of very meaningful, things that needs to be unlocked in the market, right? And then basically once you have your objective, what's is required is for you to say, if we want to achieve these objectives, what should we be doing? What are the areas of intervention that we should be investing? Is it training? Is it MIS? What is it? And that will give you kind of a nice look from your failures to basically your key intervention area. So let me walk you through this. First, we'll do an example, so I don't want to read you a little bit of the root cause analysis. This is one of the failures identified in the Malagasy MRD market. There's a lack of public-private partnership for case management. If you remember, we discussed this a little bit. Basically, public sector completely ignores the private sector, and private sector disregards public sector. So basically, no one talks to each other, and no one knows what are the fever case management guidelines, regulations. So we went through the whys, and we did the exercise. So it might be a little bit small, and let me just read that. No sense of responsibility of the private sector from the MOH. As I said, why do we have no private-public partnership? Well, public sector doesn't care. Okay, why public sector doesn't care? Well, public sector doesn't care because they feel that they only need to be in charge of the public sector, right? Why aren't they looking at the private sector? Well, guess what? They don't have any information from the private sector. Private sector doesn't feed the national information system. So basically, it's kind of a black box for the public sector. They just don't know at what level they should engage with the private sector. They don't know who are the actors. So that's basically is the root cause of no requirement for private sector to share fever case management data with MOH. There is no legal framework for engaging with and supervising the private sector. Nowhere it is written that the public sector has the responsibility to actually engage with the private sector and control and supervise the private sector. So basically, we identified two root causes. One being that there is no requirement, so that the root causes are the greener boxes, right? No requirement for private sector to share fever case management data with the MOH. And we basically realized also that there's a huge structural misalignment within the MOH in terms of overseeing the private sector. The best case example is that formal pharmacies, and there's a couple of hundreds of those in Madagascar, are supervised by the department. But the rural pharmacies are basically delivering the same type of service as a lower level, are controlled by another department within the MOH. So within the MOH, you have two structures overseeing basically the same type of channels. And none of these structures are talking to each other. So can you just tell me, how would we flip these two root causes into desired outcome? What would be the desired outcome of having on one side the fact that the private sector doesn't share information or doesn't, feed their fever case management data into the national health system, so that the public sector would have a view in terms of to what extent they contribute to achieve universal coverage of diagnosis in Madagascar. And on the other side, we have a huge structural problem. What is in our sphere of influence versus our sphere of control? What do you think is more controllable? Obviously, if the structural problem is something we can influence, we can, have them look at, the current structure and say, well, you know what, maybe we should try to think of having only one department in charge of the entire channel pharmacy, whether it's rural versus urban. How do you flip that around so that you have a desired statement? What is the desired outcome when you see these problems? How would you portray the desired outcome?
Probably something like private sector and public sector data in the same data. Reported in the same database.
Exactly. So that's exactly what they come up with. Basically, they said the desired outcome is that information flow is optimal between the public and the private sector regarding fever case management. And they went broader than just feeding the data of fever case management. They need to know the guidelines. Before asking them to feed their fever case management data, they actually need to understand what is the national policy, what is the Ministry of Health, what does the Ministry of Health wants to achieve. So basically, this sharing of information becomes the desired outcome. And so the objective was pulled out of this desired outcome. So basically, it's improve the NNCP to share information regarding fever case management between public sector and private sector. And so it's a kind of a broad category, but it really gives you, okay, we know what we need to unlock, okay? This is exactly what came up. It's in red, so the desired outcome, well, it's in French, so the desired outcome is basically sharing more information. So once you have flipped these root causes into desired outcome, we've used this matrix that obviously presents all the market failures. So these are all the 8 market failures that we have identified, prioritized in the previous session yesterday, if you remember that. So basically what you do is that you lay out the strategy, the prioritized failures, and then you present all your flipped root causes into objectives, all right? So this one is the create demand one, right? It's related to increase demand for MRDT at provider level. So let me rephrase. You have your root cause analysis. You have flipped it over, and that gives the orange box, which are your objectives, right? This is the flow that we went through from analyzing the failures and coming up with these objectives. Now, these are a lot of objectives. Do you agree? I mean, it's kind of hard to have an elevator speech or give the flavor of where you need to be focusing. Now, this is not straightforward, and I have to tell you that someone, when you do the workshop, needs to take a little bit of perspective, because the exercise now is to link the objective with the failures, to give your strategic priorities. And these are the strategic priorities that we came up with. And basically, we'll link them with the objectives. So basically, we have 3 strategic priorities. First is obviously catalyze the private sector involvement. So there's a lack of involvement of the private sector related to obviously the core functions of the market. So they need to be more engaged in the market. Then we have obviously the supporting functions, but then again, the supporting functions, we don't always want to do it ourselves. So here the idea, when you look at the objective, it's all about strengthening the NMCP capacity to better link the private sector with the public sector. And so it's basically improving the stewardship of the NMCP and fever case management, both in the public and the private sector. Obviously, our focus here, well, the private sector. So that's why we have phrased clearly that the strategic priority was to support NMCP to play a stewardship role in fever case management for private sector. And then obviously related to the rule function, remember these VAT failure that we had, the 20% VAT on MRDT? Well, then the strategic priority is really to advocate for a catalytic policy change environment. So basically what we want is to make sure that the enabling environment for MRDT will indeed favor the development of the market so that we can achieve higher volume in the market, higher value in the market, and ultimately increase use over needs for SARA, right? So now you see that, in a very linear way, going from left to right, it kind of starts to narrow down and be much more concrete in terms of what needs to be done to address our strategic or party failures. Now, the objective in itself are already pretty clear, but what we suggest is that once you have your objectives, the idea is to go one level deeper and identify what we call key intervention areas. These key intervention areas are really the operational aspect of what needs to be done. So basically, when you look at the first objective, it's improve RDT forecasting and reporting capacity according to national guidelines. But what are the intervention areas related to achieving that objective? Well, we need to improve their forecasting capacity of the importer, right? They need to know what are the volume in the market that they can import. We need to improve their importation process in the sense that they don't know which are the supplier of MRDT. There are not many of them, but they need to know which one they should go for. And obviously, we need to ensure that stock management is optimized in the sense that we will not face any stock out issues in the private sector. So these intervention area just gives you an example of what will be the focus of the interventions down the intervention design. It actually help you frame your interventions. So if you see, for me, of all the outputs, except maybe the theory of change, this is probably one of the most operational outputs of a TMA workshop, right? This is basically the summary of what needs to be done. Obviously, there's much more to it in the sense is that we still need to flesh out all the interventions related to this key area, these key areas. So as you can see, there's about 7, 8, a little bit more than that, interventions that the team has decided to focus on. And that now becomes basically the starting point for designing the intervention. So you will flesh out the forecasting. So what do we need to do to improve forecasting of the importer, the capacity of forecasting of the importer? Do we need to have a forecasting model? What is the forecasting model? On what will it be based? So now it gets very concrete in terms of addressing what failure. We'll look back at the life. ACD subsidy, imposed subsidy on MRDT. It's related to importer distributor not incentivized to develop the market. So all these are related to your failures, right? So there's always a link. And again, remember that these failures are prioritized failures. So it's not all the failures in the market, it's your prioritized failures, okay? So it's very linear. The output is very powerful. The process to get it is not simple. Just process check. We did all this in less than 3 days, right? So you get all this information. If you have a good desk review, if you have a good mapping of the market, I believe believe me, it's not complex it's complex when you do the exercise, but it's not time consuming, right? It's very operational and you can get something in about 3 days.